All right, so I'm going to actually make this and talk through it again. I've done it with a couple friends. I saw this the other day on Veritasium, I believe is how you say it, the YouTube channel. Friended him on Instagram and all that stuff too. I forget the name of the conjecture that this was about, but well, it was one of those things that once I saw it, I kind of thought to myself, well, that's an elegant little cutie. I was kind of thinking about it, and then it just kind of rolled around, and for the last week or so, it just kind of keeps popping up in my head, and, well, first of all, Veritasium, thank you for doing that. Seriously, thank you from the bottom of my heart, truly thank you, and because I have not been able to get this out of my head, also, I hate you. Just kidding. But I think I got something that makes sense. That sounds really weird. So actually, I'm doing this so someone can prove me wrong, quite honestly. Anyway, here goes. See if that makes... Alrighty there. So, I'm assuming this is visible. For anyone you can see. So the thing was 3n plus 1, right? Over the odds, and then take away all the evens until there's no more odds. I'm going to go ahead and say that they say that this will never prove that this will converge, right? Prove that it won't bounce anywhere else, that it'll always go down, so to speak. And really, I think I got a different way of looking at this, and I'm going to try and do this without being weird here. I got a couple of things. First of all, let's get a couple of things straight. The number I'm going to do, I tried to keep the variables that I was doing this as I was working through it correct. The odds, 2x plus 1, right? And this odds can be written a couple of ways. Right, whoa! Oopsie. 2x plus or minus 1 will get you odds. Some people may or may not understand that, but that is quite honestly the truth. Now the weird part is that either one will get you odds, but they have a little, much like this will always get you an even, right? When it's applied to odds, I should say. This will always do a certain thing. So does this. 2x plus 1 gets you the odds over the naturals. As soon as you take the x and make it a negative, if you're going to you're going to go over integers, you have to go the other direction, right? This is a process. You're trying to generate the odds. So the process has to go back. If you're going to have a negative on the x, you need a negative on the 1. So that gets you the negative odd numbers. I'll get back to this in a moment. That being said, I'm going to go with the 2x plus 1 for the positive naturals. 3n plus 1 applied to that has this same quality, all right? If we're trying, what I see here is I see you're taking the odds and making it an even, because that's what it'll always do. Since this is, again, a process, you can make an even number either way from an odd. If n is always an odd, which we're saying it is, you can make this an even every time by doing this. I'll get to that in a second. You can also make an even by doing the 3n minus 1, right? But it's a different kind of even, and I'm going to posit that it's the same thing as this 2x plus and minus 1, in that once you expand the domain of n from the naturals to the integers, you essentially say this is a negative. So 3n plus 1 equals y, right? In this graph. Well, if you're going to reverse this process, you need to negate the whole thing. If you're going to say there's a negative there, you need a negative there, you need a negative y. That will get you this other, these are asymptotic right here to the to a particular bit in there, right? So these things don't go. These are the two possible. There's like ghost 3n plus and minus 1 and equals y, and 3n plus and minus 1 equals negative y. I think, or something like that. Anyway, it's something like that. It goes there. So we're talking about these two. You get this little space right here where it can bounce. If you do it piecewise like that, because again, this is a process, right? This is an iterative process. It's directional. If we're just talking about numbers, positive and negative, it's not always so clear that it's directional. But in this, it is, right? The negative is a direction because we're talking about doing something in sequence. So in this, it's a direction. That means that in order to get the negatives and deal with asymmetries, you need to negate the whole thing. So you get this graph. Right? You get some of these things that are all in the middle here. Right? You get these other ghost solutions that don't really belong on these sides of the graphs. All that sort of stuff. But just looking at this real quick, if we're generating this, what I saw was generating it for any and all n integers, right? Whenever n is odd, then you do this. Otherwise, if it's even, you divide by 2 until you get to an odd number, blah, blah. So what I'm saying is 3n plus 1 over the odds, right? Evens divide by 2 until you get to an odd. So anytime you apply this 3n plus 1 rule, it's going to be on a number that is odd. Well, multiplying those together, we get 6x plus 4, right? Simple algebraic arithmetic there. That's 3, substitute n for 2x plus 1. 3 times 2x plus 1 is what? 3x plus, or 6x plus 3 plus 1 is 4. 6x plus 4. So every time, if we're generating these in sequence for odds through this, because we don't care about the evens, we only care about any number that's an odd. Right? The evens are always going to be divided by 2 until we get to an odd. So this is really, how do we get to when we take an odd number and multiply this, how do we ensure that it's always going to be even and that we reduce it to 0, right? Because essentially what we're saying is the loop, everyone that talk about the 4, 2, 1 loop, is when n equals 0, right? N equals 0 goes back up and down. It's just when n equals 0, this just constantly loops. So, right? If this equals 1, then it's odd times that. You feed this to itself, 1 to itself, the identity of this thing just always returns back 4, 2, 1, 4, 2, 1, right? That's the loop. Being directional, only talking about the positives. Any negatives are a whole different story, but I'll get to that in just a minute because there is still symmetry. You just got to make sure you treat it like a process and that it has directionality like a vector. And thus you get over here, 6x plus 4 would be the result of this, right? For any odd number, which is all we're going to be. And this, for any given x, that's an integer, that is an odd, which satisfies this, we do this to it. So regardless of whether you get to, like, say 6 divided by 2, you get to 3, it's still an odd number, right? It's just going to be a smaller number than the one you previously did because you've already divided by 2. So it's a smaller odd number that already satisfies this condition. All right, so any even number will just be a smaller number than the one prior to it that would have been an odd number that this applied to. Hope that makes sense to anyone but me. I'm just talking my way through this, you guys. I am not a math professor. I am going to use terms that probably aren't rigorously or completely correct, and I am going to try because this just came out at me, and it seems to be right, and I don't know why it wouldn't be, and I would like to find out. So, one of these things I'm going to apply here is I looked 6k plus or minus I, or what was it, the am plus or minus b or something like that, where any integer can be expressed as this form, where k is any integer and I is one of these. Since we have the case where it is 4, that's going to make even numbers, right? Real quick, this is going to always be an even number. We know this here too because there's odds to this. This generates an even number. More importantly, any even integer or all even integers can be expressed with this form. Some way, shape, or form or another, any and all even integers can be expressed of this form. I think that's important. Because really, as long as you iterate through this, you want to make sure that this can't equal something else that will loop, right? Once you start dividing by 2, this won't equal one of the previous terms. As long as you're dividing by 2, this won't equal the previous term, right? Previous term was these. So, this is going to be weird. 6x plus 4, just one first power of 2 goes to 3x plus 2, right? There's a 2 you can pull out of that. So there's pretty much always, we know that it's going to be an even number, so there's always at least 1 2 you can pull out. And that brings us to this cute little thing right here. 3x plus 2. This x is the original one used to generate this odd number. Right? I'll get back to that in a minute. So that very first one gets to here. Now, if this is divisible by 2, right? If 3x plus 2 is an even number, x has to be an even number, right? 3 times an even number, right, is an even number. 3 sets of 2. 3 times 8 is an even number. 3 times an odd number is an odd number. Plus 2 means it's going to be an odd number or an even number if this is odd or even. As long as x is odd from here, this will go up. It will never go back to one of these two terms. It will always go up as long as x is odd. As long as x is even, it will reduce until it is to another form that is not. And since we're only talking about integers, we can't make this look like 3x plus 1. To make this look like 2x plus 1. This is for any power of 2. This will never be the same as one of the previous terms. Right? And just to go look, I went and looked as why 3n minus 1, why you can get another even number, why it doesn't work when you do it out. It will immediately upon the first one bring you back, right? 3n minus 1 will bring you back to this 3x plus 1. Same one that featured before. It'll take you to another odd. It flip-flops between odd and even. Which means anything that has an odd number of repetitions will probably send you, has the potential of sending you back, right? So this one won't work. If you reverse everything, so it's 2x minus 1 and 3n, I don't know if you can even see that here. Oh yeah, hey. If you reverse everything so that it's 3n minus 1 and 2x minus 1, you get the 6x minus 4 and 3x minus 2, same as up here, and you get the negative version and it works, right? There's no asymmetries. It will always go up when it's supposed to. It maintains directionality, chirality, whatever you want to call it. I'm not always sure what that, I am honestly not sure what that, well, that wasn't what I expected. I'm not sure what these terms are, quite honestly, how to properly speak the terms that everyone's mentioning here. One, I've never been trained in it. This is just me looking at stuff and thinking it was fun. So, yeah. For what that's worth, it probably tells you a little too much about what I think is fun. So, yeah. This got me really kind of, this will never go. And just to give you an idea of how it works, what was one that I wanted to do? Let's do x is 3, right? We'll do 3, because this is a fun one. Now I can pull this through, right? 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 7 times 3 is 21. Plus 1 is 22, right? Or we come back over here. 6x plus 4, you do that. 3. 6 times 3, 18 plus 4 is 22. Hey! Divided by 2 is 11, right? Now, this is, and x was odd. 3 times 3 is 9 plus 2 is 11. Man, I'm going to have to do that. But here's the other thing. This is also this. If this is 11, this is also equal to 2 times 5 plus 1, right? May even shine that somewhere where you can see it. This is probably a bad color. We'll do this. I'm just using 3, right? So if this is odd, it can always be rewritten as 2 to some integer plus 1, right? If this is odd, it can also be rewritten as 2 to some integer plus 1. So if we know that x was 3, we come in here. This becomes 3 times 3 is 9 plus 2 is 11. Minus 1 is 10. Divided by 2 is 5. So now we've got 5, right? Well, 3 times 5 is odd. See where I'm going here? 3 times 5 is odd. 15 plus 2 is 17. Man, minus 1 is 16 divided by, that's power 2. Once this becomes even and it's power 2, it will always generate an even number, or it will keep going. It's sort of like, why is stuff always in the last place you look for it? It's because you don't keep looking after you find it. Once this thing hits an even number, it reduces. And it will always reduce once this input, this 3x plus 2, is whenever x is odd. Whenever your original starting integer that you're using to generate the odd numbers is an odd number itself, it will bounce up and up and up. Or when it is a non-even multiple of 2, the very same one. So any square of 2 you use to generate this will also generate that. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say any square of 2. Even numbers that when you multiply by 3 are 2 away from an even square. I don't even know how to write that, quite honestly. I know how to say it, but not write it. Right? So 14 plus 2. Quite honestly, any perfect square of 4 and then multiplied by 2. Any even multiple of 2. Once it satisfies this, and then you rehash, if it's not even, you remake it into the 2x. I shouldn't even do that. These little weights aren't working so good at the far edges. When the 3x plus 2 is odd and it is equal to 2x1 plus 1, when this is a power of 2, it will collapse. And the way this is set up is to make it forever continuously generate even integers of the form 6k plus 4, right, or 6x plus 4, so always generating those, and always ensuring that it's an even number that when first divisible by 2 is larger, and 3x plus 2 is not the same as 3n plus 1. I know I'm using it here, but it is larger and always will be larger than that which fed it, and unequal. It will always, this will never, ever, this process will never, on positive, as long as you use the 2 positive, it will never, ever go out of reach. It will always generate even integers literally, until you get to an even power of 2, an even prime factor of 2. There is no value or power of 2 where this doesn't happen. You have only 2 outcome possibilities. 3x plus 2 is odd, in which case you repeat. Or 3x plus 2 is even, in which case you divide by 2 until not. This is an algorithm to generate to always generate an even number and remove odds. This is like the in between the squares. This is an interesting one. But this is so cool because directionality in this matters so much to the proof. Say, will it always condense? Yeah, because it'll always generate a power of 2. It's not a matter of will it. It always is when. It's when these become evens and odds. How often does this have to iterate? And I don't know how to do it before it does. Will it always miss a power of 2? No, it can't. It only does even numbers. So every time it won't do even numbers, this ensures that it's essentially a random number generator that just removes the odds. Right? Once you get this 3x plus 2, and then that feeds in. 3x plus 2 turns into, how do you make this 1, right? You're like, wait a minute. 3x plus 1 equals 2x. Right? That's not right either. Right? It just isn't right either. Because really, if 3x plus 2 is 2x, you just divide by 2 and you get x. So it doesn't seem to work. It's kind of tricky when you start looking at it in certain ways. It doesn't fit. But it's not a matter of will it. You're like, oh, it will never go down. Yeah, it will. I don't know how to write it other than the fact that because when you divide this by 2, you get this, and you can keep dividing, right? You can keep dividing 3 halves x plus 1, right? It's not the same. You can keep going. Yes, this always will. Why won't it bounce? It won't ever bounce because it doesn't have the same value as one of the factors. Right? If it has the same value as one of the factors, it can bounce. It can divide by 2. This can come back, and it'll start switching. So all it has to do is get to an odd number, right? Odd, even, odd, even, odd, even. If this is odd, this is odd. If this is even, this is even. You need it to maintain that identity. This flipping means that anytime this is odd, this becomes even. Which means that 3 times x is odd, which means x is odd. Right? So there's a flip-flop that goes here. If you have this 3n minus 1, which is what would be the other way to try and make it even. So going down, should I say left or however you want to do it, decreasing it, you can bounce. You can come into contact with the same value you had before. With this, you essentially are saying anything that is just one short of a, like, if x equals 2, right? This is 4 2s. If x is some 2 to the c, right? For any x that is that, you just have to go until it makes an even power of 2. That's it. Anything that's an even power 2. Basically all of the 2s. 32s, right? Anything that's an even power of 2s. It's a couple of them. But anything that once you start reducing it, if you're able to go here and you go up pretty soon, it'll just go up so high that it gets divided. It's smaller than the last odd set that you already showed would. Anytime you run through the X as a sequence, any previous sequence would be able to show that the coming up ones would. Like, oh, this is too big. Any primes will always fit, right? Because this makes an even number. It's not a matter of that. This is always going to be an even number that is massively larger than the original. So this one here, if you pull an odd, right? We're not talking about evens. You pull an odd. This is going to be huge. But more importantly, when you divide by 2, you can get bigger. But when you get the smaller numbers are not what I'm thinking about here. I'm thinking about much, much, much larger numbers, like 101. Right? 303 plus 2 is 5. As these start getting bigger, it becomes more important. It just becomes more apparent. 101 is odd. But everything I do to get here, right? If X is 101, 303, 305, it's not divisible by 2. 304 is. So that's what, 152, which is divisible by 2. See where I'm going? 76, which is divisible by 2. Okay, it's 38. Again, divisible by 2. 19. So I've got 19, which is 2 times 9 plus 1. Alright, so I got odd again. Yes, it will keep bouncing. Is there anything to say that it won't come back? Yeah, it'll never come back to the same number. And then go through the same bit. It can't. It can only cycle through more of these. Like, what about these other old ones where this 3x plus 2 is equal to an earlier one? If it's equal to an earlier odd, there's nothing but bounces. It's not equal to an earlier one. There's never a time where this will equal an old one. Right? So if this is equal to an odd, it's never going to be the same as this odd. Right? The exact same one it did before. Or if it is, it's one that's of the same, it's one of the same structure. Like we just showed with the 19. You can do 19 and put it in here and it'll go through as well. You get to 101 and eventually you're down to a factor of 19 where that's the only thing. 101 has the same problem that just doing 19. As you roll through and don't find anything, all you need to do after that is start finding the largest prime factors. Quite honestly, the only way to ever prove this would be if you knew where all the primes are. Which isn't that one of those other impossible problems, like the Riemann zeta zeros or something like that? Yeah, so it can't ever do that. This one can. You can get back. You can divide by 2 to some degree and return one of the factors, right? 3x plus 1, 3n plus 1. Either way, whenever x is odd, right, you're going to divide by 2. But if x is odd, right, odd, It's always going to be odd. This is, if you divide by 2, blah, blah, blah. Right? It can still bounce. This can be the exact same factor. You can go up to some arbitrary power of 2 and then come back down to 3x plus 1. Same thing happens when you're going the opposite direction. You'll have where 3x minus 2 is true. You will have, if you're using the plus, it's true. But really, if you go the opposite direction, same is true for 6x minus 2 over 2, right? You can get to 3x minus 1 or 3n minus 1. I don't know if you can see that on camera. Anyway, not sure how much that is proof. There's no number x that you can choose that will make this bounce in the positive domain. In the domain that this is originally said to, in the positive naturals, this will always form an even number. And that even number may or may not be an even power of 2. If it's not, it will keep generating new numbers. This will always ensure that whatever odd number you pull, you number 1, multiply it by 3 and 2, and then add 2 more 2. So you ensure it's a larger even. And once you divide by 2, you can't, any power of 2 will never get you one, no matter what you do, since it's divided by 2, any power of 2 will never get you one of the previous terms. So you'll never get back to the exact same value that you previously had. You can get to a value that you show works, but there isn't an odd one that won't. This one's different, where you look at going to an even number the other way, and same with that. This one's directional for generating the odds. This one doesn't work the same as for generating it, because you can get the same factors back again. So even though you can be like, hey, take an odd number, make it even, all right? That would work. 3n minus 1 would work. It, however, will not always remove the odds like 3n plus 1 then divided by 2 will. This just makes it add that 1, which generates a new random number on top. X is an even number. This will be an even number. But it'll bounce back down to any of the odd prime factors. So honestly, the only way I can see to ever prove this is if you could prove that every single prime number did follow this. But, I'm looking at this and what primes are 6k plus or minus 1 or what, 5? Or minus 1 for that matter. So minus 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. And right now 4 we know goes into 2. So as long as it's an odd, we're going to make it even, and we're going to cycle it through every possible integer. To me, it's not a matter of will it eventually hit a power of 2. It's how long. How do you tell how long it takes for this feeding integer that you use to iterate over to run down to some power of 2? Or just below, right? How does this original n term become 0? And it always will. So whenever it's 2x plus 1, it'll just keep on going. It'll never make it. You always have to drop it back down. It'll never make it higher. It'll never bounce again. It'll go up, but eventually this algorithm, over and over again, feeding different numbers, each number will generate a new even. And that even number will never bounce to a previous one. This can't be generated from this process unless they're multiplied together, which is what we're doing. Could that really be it? Could it be that simple? Could it be that easy? I mean, that... Right? It works. As long as it generates. I know there's questions about why won't it ever go down? Why does it ever go down? So all it has to do is hit it once. Right? Multiple powers of 2 are guaranteed. Doesn't take long for it to be a fairly quick reduction. Right? Several powers of 2 reduces large numbers fast. It might go up. It could, but determining that x to always, when is it odd, when is it even? That's all it is. That initial one you use to generate the odds that feed this algorithm, that's all that matters. Right? So if you're looking at 1, 3, 5, and you can reverse engineer the 2x plus 1 from the odd you're feeding it, you will know if it's going to bounce. And then you can use that iteration on the 3x plus 2, right? Could it really be that easy? Anyway, this thing has been just on my mind. Sometimes these things just kind of catch you and it's hard to let go, right? But yeah. As long as 6x plus 4 is a way to generate even numbers, unique even numbers, because it's going to always change the value by at least 1 from previous factors, right? It will generate even numbers until it generates a power of 2, at which point it will stop the process. It will halt. Because once you reach an even power of 2 with no other factors, which 6x plus 4 eventually always will, right? 3x plus 2 is designed to get there. You change that around to the 2x plus 1, you subtract 1 and then divide by 2. It'll always get you there. You'll always have that new number. You can look at it. It will never go to nowhere, because eventually that 6x plus 4 will provide you with a power of 2 with no mod, with no odd prime factors. It's just a matter of time. I suppose I don't know how to do the full proof on the 6k plus or minus I, but I did look it up at the MB plus or minus k. They have to be prime to each other, right? 6x plus 4 is not prime to each other, but 3x plus 2 is. Should generate all the numbers. 2x plus 2 should generate evens. 6x plus 4 should generate evens with plenty of extra space. Should always have at minimum 1 power of 2 in there. Right? Any others are constants? I'm rambling now, but that seems right. Is that even possible? Anyway, thought I would put this out here. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong. Thanks.